Folks, welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're back for part two of the discussion of the defense versus the Browns. Outstanding freaking game. It's one of the ones we're going to really enjoy in the history of this rivalry. And discussing it with me is Brandon Croxton. Brandon, how you doing?
Hey Ken, doing great. Yeah, this is very exciting, and this is a big win to try to set yourself up to win this division. You're now in sole possession of first place, and you've gotten two road wins in the division out of the way, and it's very, very exciting, very good position to be in.
So we talked about some very interesting topics, I thought, in part one. Answered a couple fantastic questions, I thought, from people who were in pounds using hashtag Film Study mailbag. But we talked a little bit about what do the Ravens do with their depth now at cornerback, newfound depth at cornerback and safety, where they have some options in terms of how they align people with Mollett at slot corner, with the possibility of Hamilton staying there when Williams returns, with Stone's play being at a high level, with the possibility of bringing up Duron Harmon from the practice squad, with the four cornerbacks they could have, along with Humphrey for two outside corner spots, where they still have not been able to get Rock Yassin on the field for very many snaps so far. So unbelievably, the Ravens piling up depth at corner that I don't think anybody expected them to have, that has largely, I think, been a function of, at least the quality of play has been a function of how effective their cover two defense has been. And Brandon and I had a long discussion about that in the first episode. So I think it's worth going to. We also talked a little bit about the simplified game plan the Ravens used in this one in terms of both pass rush, using almost exclusively the nickel package, keeping eyes on the quarterback at all times in zone defense, and just how effective that was against DTR. It's a good listen. Go back and download that one, maybe even before you listen to this one. It's out there. Brandon, great to have you back and talk a little bit. I think we'll jump right in on some individual player discussion, and there are a lot of Raven stars from this one, but start us off and pick one.
Sure. Well, it was hard for me to pick any one particular defensive lineman, but so I'll just talk kind of a little bit about the entire defensive line, which played just an incredibly great game. Cleveland's offensive line is one of the better ones of the league, and the Ravens just manhandled them up front. They weren't able to run the ball at all the entire game, and all the interior defensive linemen were able to get pressure and even get a couple of sacks. Broderick Washington had a sack. Matabike had a sack. Brent Urban got a nice hit on DTR to force a incompletion on a deep pass, and Pierce was holding up the middle pretty well and drew a holding call and got a big QB hit on himself also. So this is a great just beat down from the defensive line, and every one of them played really well.
Yeah, I agree. For starters, I thought they won the game in a lot of ways in this one. All of the back seven with eyes on the football played fantastic, but I don't think it would have been possible to continue with a four-man pass rush down after down after down and all the success they had with that had they not been getting some interior pressure from that DL fairly regularly. And we mentioned that they had 45% pressure on the 40 plays that resulted in a pass or sack in this one. Probably a little bit higher than that if you include the scrambles where DTR was forced to leave the pocket. But, very fine game. I thought Matabike in particular had his best game of the season. He'd been having a lot of problems with penalties. In this one, he came up with a sack where he kind of rolled over DTR profitably for a sack. And I think, didn't he have another QH? What was his other pressure event? Yeah, he had a quarterback hit on the interception by Stone towards the end of the game. So a really nice game from him. Didn't play the run poorly, I would say. So very positive that he got on the board. The other thing I'll say about Matabike in particular is he played only 35 snaps in this game. Now, the Ravens lost snap count again, 65-55 in this game. And it's becoming a problem that they seem to lose it every week. The Monken offense, for a lot of the red zone success it's had in particular, which I think, by the way, is much more important um,
Hmm.
has not been tremendously effective in terms of series success rate, where it's been less of a successful thing. By the way, I think we were supposed to hit on that, and we didn't in the first episode. So maybe after talking about these defensive linemen, we'll move back to some of the drive stats you have and the red zone
Sure.
percentages the Ravens have shown. But I'm a firm believer that Madubuike needs to play less to be his freshest as a pass rusher, and I thought he finally got that opportunity in this game with only 35 snaps played.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this was one of the best games by the defensive line by far, and Madubuike is definitely his best game of the year. Yeah.
So, Brandon, you, as a defensive lineman yourself, can you remember the last time you played 35 snaps in a game? It was no time in college? Am I correct about that?
No time in college. It was high school. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then you would have been on the field pretty much 100% of snaps, or did you ever come out?
Yeah. Rarely would I come out, but yeah, I easily played that many snaps every game.
Okay.
Senior year. Yeah.
And you had a little offensive line play to go with that?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay.
Played it both ways a little bit too. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's certainly impressive. So you're the Daryl Worley from last week, 102 snap guy. There you go.
Not nearly that good. But,
Let's talk about the rest of the defensive line before we go back to some of these stats and take a break for that. I thought Michael Pierce had an unheralded great game, and he'd been really overworked the first few games, but this game he got kind of a little bit of a break, and it was definitely a side benefit of this game. Madubuike still led the line in snaps, but Pierce got reduced to, let me give you the number here. And these are only the snaps that resulted in a non-penalty play, only 30 snaps, which for him is quite low. When he was in the game, the Browns averaged only 1.2 yards per play on those 30 snaps. So even though they were 2.8 yards or whatever they were overall, looks like 2.6, they were only 1.2 when he was in there. He had 0 pressures of his own as I scored it, but that didn't mean he wasn't absolutely a bulwark against the run and very effective at keeping the pocket compressed as a pass defender, even though he didn't score a pressure on that.
right. Yeah. He's still an effective in the nose, and he drew a holding penalty on a scramble by DTR at one point, and
Good point.
brought it back, and it brought back a pretty decent gain. So, holding penalties are almost as good as sacks, and that these holding penalties can be drive killers. They lose 10 yards. The only disadvantage is you don't get that loss of down.
Yeah. And they do give you optionality, though. So if the play ends up being worse, like a turnover or a long sack, you can take the other play. So post-snap penalties are killers, period.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that defensive linemen need to be carefully and positively graded for each penalty that they draw. It's an art form in a little bit. You want to make sure you know where those hands are on you as a defensive lineman. Does the offensive lineman has jersey, and do you have a way to wiggle outside his frame and show it off to the referee if the ball is legitimately to either side of you?
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Did you have any tricks for doing that when you were playing?
No, it wasn't that good.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back and talk about what we promised to talk about in the first episode, which is the Ravens' generalized red zone success. And you had some other information to talk about drive rates for the defense. So if it's okay, I'll start with the red zone success first, because I think that's been one of the stories of the season so far. The Ravens have an 80% TD rate on 15 red zone possessions this year. So they've had an interception, 2 field goals, and 12 touchdowns. I want to give you some context for that. That's 6.1 points per red zone possession. And by comparison, opponents have converted only 3 of 10 red zone trips into touchdowns. So they probably are a little bit, I don't know if they're a little bit over 3 points per red zone possession, or maybe a little bit under. But anyway, significantly less is obviously the point I'm making. Last year, the best team in the National Football League was about 71%. The median team in the National Football League was around 56%, and the Ravens were around 44%, which I think if you look at the difference in offense between these two seasons, that's the thing you have to point to is red zone success.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's, the difference between 7 and 3 is huge. And the Ravens last year they were able to move the ball efficiently into the red zone a lot more than they've been able to do so far this year. But the difference has been when we get in the end zone, when we get in the red zone this year, scoring touchdowns. And last year, like you said, less than 50% of the time you're scoring a touchdown in the red zone. It's just not good enough.
Right. Some of that was Tyler Huntley, of course. Having Lamar Jackson is good, but honestly, I don't think there was as much of a difference as we would hope there would be between those two.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember them being. They struggled in the red zone with Lamar also. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Now you had some stats for the defense, and I'm dying to hear these because I didn't look at this and I should have.
Yeah. So, I'll talk a little bit about the game and then kind of a little bit about what they've been doing in the season. So, against the Browns yesterday, they had 12 drives, 12 total drives. Eight of the drives ended with the Browns moving the ball 20 yards or fewer. So there was, and one of the drives was actually a negative 16-yard drive, which is going back 5 yards per play for 3 plays.
Yep.
And then you're punting. That's pretty nice right there. They had only 2 drives of 40 yards or more, and those ended in a field goal, which was off, and that 40 yards was off of the 37-yard defensive pass interference by Brandon Stevens, which you could argue may or should not have been called because that ball was thrown 10
Not
yards
catchable.
Off target, that there was no way the receiver was going to catch it. And the other one was at the end of the game, the long run, and it ended with an interception. So this team is very hard to have any kind of sustained success, moving the ball for the offense. And for the season, they have 47 total drives. 11 drives have gone for 40 yards or more. So about 23% of the time they get about 40 yards. And those have ended in just, out of those 11, it's just been 3 touchdowns, 5 field goals, a turnover on downs, and 2 interceptions. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's much better than expected because you'd expect it to be, first of all, if you're just truncating to drives of 40 yards plus, you'd expect more touchdowns than that.
Yeah.
Then they didn't even convert the rest into field goals. It's turnovers and downs and it's whatnot. But
right.
Remarkable.
This has been, they've been playing just great team defense. They're not giving up big plays. There's no blown coverages. And, another thing is they're flying to the ball. Like they're not missing tackles, and on the occasions when they do miss tackles, they have 2 or 3 guys right there to, keep it from being an even bigger gain. So, things like that cause big plays, and they have just been excellent at doing everything. And they're playing as good as defensive football as anybody in the league right now.
Yeah, I might argue better, but there are teams who've given up less points at this point. Mm-hmm. And what the Ravens have done is really exceptional, certainly in terms of any kind of yards per play statistic. And you mentioned the rallying to the football thing. You're put in a position to do that by playing good zone defense. That's one of the benefits is eyes are on the quarterback, but also eyes are on the receiver. As soon as you can't get easily given the hook if you're a defensive back or a safety in particular, because you've got back end coverage responsibility by a tight end or wide receiver who's calling for the football while somebody else has it already underneath. So it's just much harder to be fooled on the back end of the defense there, which leads to 11 billiard balls aiming straight at that guy who has the football, and it's not a good position to be with. Even if you've got Zay Flowers hemmed in by 4 guys, you're not too optimistic about the eventual result of that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Great stuff there, by the way. Thank you for preparing that. I appreciate you being ready with this kind of stuff. Who else would you like to talk about?
So let's talk about a little bit about what Marlon Humphrey has nicknamed Mr. Almost Jadavian Clowney.
I thought that video clip, if you haven't seen it yet, of Marlon sticking a camera in Clowney's face after the game and calling him Mr. Almost and saying, people are calling you Mr. Almost. And then Clowney unloads on him with an expletive and whatnot. And Humphrey goes, well, actually, that was me. I just thought of that. It's very funny, but boy, you'd have to be Marlon Humphrey to try that. I wouldn't want to be a rookie and try that to Clowney on the team plane.
Oh no! And Clowney looked pissed when he heard that. And he said he found out after it was a joke. He lightened up, but yeah, I mean, Clowney has really been a big asset to this defense so far this year. He's putting pressure on quarterbacks, and he's been easily their best outside pass rusher all year. And unfortunately, he's been Mr. Almost. You would have liked to see him get at least 1 sack from his former team, but he's really been a disrupting force. And he had another tackle for loss, and he had 3 or 4 pressures and hits on the quarterback, and he's playing a lot better than even what I would have expected to see out of him so far.
This is interesting. I scored him for 4 pressures, and I'm just noting PFF has him for 6. Normally, I might have him for more because of a 3-second standard and whatnot. But one of them, he missed the sack, and then Thompson Robinson turned it into, instead of what would have been about an 8-yard sack, maybe turned it into an 18-yard sack by running backwards. Inexplicably, I thought Clowney had knocked the ball free, but he actually just lost it as he was
just dropped it,
pulling his hand backwards. That was a team sack. The Ravens this year have had 2 team sacks, and I think in their entire history have probably had less than 5, I would guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a common thing anyway that occurs. So Clowney, a really exceptional game again, and he's giving the Ravens those fast initial pressures they need to get these compound events that eventually lead to sacks. And by the way, there is nothing wrong with the Ravens' ability to convert sacks in aggregate. They're 3rd in the National Football League with 15 sacks. The only 2 teams with more than them have 16 each. It might be the Chargers, because Khalil Mack, I know, had a big game, and there's one other team.
6 sacks, yeah.
Yeah. So it's relatively remarkable. But the Ravens have done a great job of generating multiple contribution sacks as they've come up with this. I don't want to get on a soapbox too much about this, but I do want to say this. PFF hands out entire pressure events to offensive linemen. And I noticed one of their guys, and I won't say who it was, said in the last week, what's stupid is fractional sacks. Because why shouldn't both guys get a full sack if they both allowed the sack, or both would have allowed the sack? And here's what I'm going to say about that. There are times when in the NFL, that's the correct way to do it, that both of your tackles get beat by the edge defender. They meet at the quarterback at the same time. Either of them would have had a sack, and you should give a sack to both of them. And that would be the proper, way to stick a metric on that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about 5% of sack plays that are developed. That the bulk of them happen the way the Ravens get them. Is there some sort of interior pressure or exterior pressure that moves the quarterback? He gets into a disadvantaged position. Somebody else finishes the sack. The guy who originally forced that pocket to be vacated, he deserves a portion of that sack. And in particular, the offensive lineman who allowed it to happen might deserve the entire sack in many cases. If he forces the quarterback to step right up into 3 defensive tackles who are, bearing down on the situation, then the sack's really on him. It's not on anybody else typically. So I think that fractional sacks are a much more accurate way to do it. But if I can't convince you on that basis, and I know we have a lot of STEM people in the audience, let me start with this. If I am limited to giving a 1 or 0 on a sack to any player on any play, whether I'm talking about a defender or an offensive lineman where I'm charging it, I am inherently going to be less accurate than someone who can, with good methodology, give out 0.4 and 0.6 or 0.25 and 0.75 or half and half, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm inherently going to be more accurate if I can give out fractional sacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know you're not the one. It sounds like I'm coming down on you, Brandon, here, but I just saw this from one of the PFF guys again this week. And they bring out this argument that I've had the conversation with them probably 20 times over the years. And exactly this one. I don't know what's happening on the other end of the phone or Twitter when it's happened, but I can only tell you eyes are glazing over because they're not really understanding the argument if they're not looking at it mathematically like that.
Yeah. So I think part of the reason the NFL does it is they want to basically have their official box score and their official game statistics match up to what actually happened in the game. So,
yeah, by the way, no problem with that. No problem at all. The NFL wants to give out halves, fulls, and zeros. I'm fine. Yeah, and not ever give out a third. No problem. They've got, but it's not the NFL is not responsible for analysis of the game. It's the outsiders who are responsible for analysis of the NFL's product.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then also I was going to say is if you give out like say a third or a quarter of a sack, it becomes a lot more subjective than with a half. You can maybe you can obviously see, oh, this guy had him by his legs, this one pushed him over, and so they both contributed equally, more or less, so they both get a half, as opposed to, well, this guy flushed him, this guy grabbed his leg but didn't quite hold on, and this guy really finished him off. And how you divide, 2 or 3 people can be a lot more complicated and a lot more subjective rather than just a basic objective measurement. So,
I'm okay with the responsibility for that subjectivity because of the increased accuracy. So I could be wrong. It could be a quarter when I'm calling it a half, but it's a half is a much better number than 1 or 0 because I'm going to be inherently much more accurate.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's move on. Talk about some other players here. Who you just brought up somebody, I think.
Yeah, I just brought up Clowney. Yep.
Clowney, right. Okay. So we've had a discussion, I think, on Clowney. How about Mollett? I want to talk about him because he's a guy who came in, played, I thought, brilliantly at slot corner, left the game with some sort of a little ding, and then came back and played after that. I heard he was evaluated for a concussion, which means he passed. It's great, by the way, when you can be evaluated in game and already be through it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So he set up the first interception on just an incredibly poor throw. So Cooper ran an inside slant pattern, and Mollett was trailing him a little bit. It was tight coverage, but he was trailing him a little bit, and DTR made the pass so poorly that he threw behind Mollett, who was a full human being behind the receiver that he was intending to throw to. And Mollett was able to at least tip the ball up in the air, and Stevens made a great diving grab for the interception. But yeah, he had a great debut, and hopefully he'll carry it over to his old team next week.
Yeah, I thought it was some wonderful play from him. He was one of the guys I have in my star treatment section, so I'll let you go there if you want to read about his game otherwise. But he had great plays against the run. He had a very nice undercut of Njoku to take him down for 5+1 on the right sideline, meaning you got only 1 yard after the catch on 3rd and 12. Did a real nice job to work off a block from a wide receiver to make a tackle for 1 yard gain on 3rd and 2, took down Ford for a loss of 2 on 2nd and 3. I mean, he just made lots of contributions, and it was pass defense. It was tackling after a pass was in there. It was containing DTR on that pitch play. Mm-hmm. By the way, does DTR need a physics lesson in that? I feel like this is something they ought to tell players about this. But if you're moving forward at a given rate of speed, that ball is also moving forward at a given rate of speed. So if you
Yep.
push it, did they tell you this on the football field on teams?
Oh no, they didn't tell us this. We were told you're told basically never to pitch like that.
Okay.
And especially what he did on that play, that was he was, I don't know, he lost his mind right there.
Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of like he pitched it, and the ball obviously held forward because it was already heading forward, and he ends up with an illegal forward pass. It cost him 5 yards, but it was funny to see.
Yeah, it was funny. So while the crowd at the stadium was watching the replay, you heard like a big like the ref made a bad call. It's like, no, he pitched that thing and it went a good yard and a half forward, even though the guy he was quote unquote aiming for was behind him a little bit. Yeah.
And he didn't complete the pitch, did he? It went out of bounds?
No, it just went out of bounds. Yeah.
It was an interesting play, and definitely one where the Ravens had it well contained. They didn't have the pitch guy covered among 3 players, but they did a good job, obviously, in getting him into a bad decision. I felt like a lot of the Ravens' defense was
the pitch guy had the pitch guy covered because he was not expecting that ball at all.
Yeah, that was Harrison Bryant. So I felt like the Ravens, frankly, were playing for unforced errors for a lot of this game, and we already talked about the pass behind that Mollett got a tip on. A lot of the really reduced accuracy, a lot of the problems with DTR having his eyes in the wrong place or giving away information to zone defense that would allow them to close on the ball and make some plays. It was all a lot of unforced errors in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, whose turn is it? I'm sorry, I just did Mollett, right? You got another player to go?
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about Kyle Van Noy's debut. He played a pretty good amount while he was considering he had just been signed off the practice squad a couple of days earlier, and played really well. He had a pass defense. He had a really nice pressure, I think, probably on one of his first couple pass rushes on a third down to force DTR out of the pocket. I think it ended up being an incompletion. And yeah, like he looks like he's gonna be, in whatever role he's gonna be, he's gonna, be a nice contributor. I mean, his ability as a Sam linebacker to help out with that until Bowser gets back, and hopefully maybe at some point Ojabo gets back, but I guess we'll see. We didn't get good news from that, but I think he's going to give some quality snaps, whatever snaps he does get.
Yeah, I agree, and they need him as a backup Sam linebacker even when Bowser comes back. So I don't even think he has to be necessarily limited to that. Although Sam is really his spot. He only dropped to coverage once in this game, but I don't think that necessarily has to be that way at all. It's a role he's played very well in his previous years at New England, playing in probably the most similar defensive scheme to the Ravens that there is out there. So I would expect him to drop to cover some. What I found really good, in addition to the pressures, is I thought he had a really good game against the run. He drew a holding penalty on the run, didn't make the score sheet for a tackle, but he also didn't have any missed tackles. And here's the big stat. The Browns rushed for 8 yards on 7 plays while he was in there against the run. Plus they had this penalty for, minus 10. Then I don't want to bring this up constantly, but I will say I looked on PFF and he had a score of 25 for tackling, which is terrible, despite not having a missed tackle. I would think you'd have to have a missed tackle to get that low. And 41.8 for run defense. So my question is, how is it possible? And I guess I could go back and look at those plays again, make sure I didn't miss something, and that's always possible. But I asked the PFF people, and Gordon McGinnis is going to look into this for me, is where was he downgraded, and why wasn't he upgraded on some of the other run plays? Because just the holding penalty alone would be, I think, worth a lot in terms of what he contributed to run defense for this game, and only 8 snaps. So, 7 plus 1. So to me, it's very unusual that he would have been in that position. So I I have to take that number with a grain of salt, both the run defense number and the tackling number. And I, like you, I thought he had a great game in terms of pressure. He was in there consistently and did very well.
Yeah, yeah, good veteran presence. Not expecting too many mistakes from him. So yeah, good to see. Good to see. Good debut.
I guess if it's my turn, I'll bring up Roquan Smith, and I think we're on the verge of taking him for granted in terms of how great he's been. But the guy is consistently coming up week after week with a level of play that is so much higher than when he was in Chicago. And you understand Chicago's kind of a messed up situation and whatnot. He probably didn't have good structure around him. He probably also didn't have good players around him. And that combination of things is bad to create some forced and unforced errors from him in terms of what he has to do to pick up assignments for other players. And yet he's been so much better in terms of his play with the Ravens than what he was there. I'm shocked by it. And I think this is another player development huge win for the Ravens, despite the fact they got him pretty much at the peak of his career in year 4, or was it even year 5? Because I think he's on the 5th-year option, right?
Yeah. Yep, year 5. Yeah.
And he's already been all pro with the Ravens. I think he's headed for several more Pro Bowls potentially, and he's still a fairly young man. He's 2 years older only than Patrick Queen. So still headed for some great things in football. I think the thing I liked about him most in this game was how he had eyes on the quarterback and really got value out of that by getting his hands on a couple of passes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will say, some people might be taking him for granted. I am not one of those people. I am appreciating and loving what he is bringing to this defense. And I mean, since he came over midseason last season.
With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you with fast, chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. If you're too busy this fall to cook but want to make sure you're eating well, then get Factor. This is what I did. We were moving, packed up all my dishes, everything needed better meals. I signed up for Factor. It's best meals, probably the healthiest I've eaten in a month, thanks to these Factor meals. Because with Factor, you can skip those extra trips to the grocery store and the chopping, the prepping, the cleanup, all while still getting flavor and the nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to crushing your goals, which for me was trying to move. But now I can't. I need them for work at lunch every day. They're perfect. So this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door, ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use that code Ravens50 like I did to get 50% off. That's Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meals.
I mean, this has been as good a defense as there is in the NFL, and they are playing. He's setting the tone. He's leading them, and he is flying around that field. If a play is, he's either on that pile making that hit, that secondary guy, or he's 2 steps away from the ball carrier when he comes down. And he's putting in he has a green dot, so he's putting them everybody's in the right position. And I mean, they're not giving up big plays. There's not missed assignments. He's everything you want in a linebacker. He's everything you want.
He really is that ultimate 3-down unicorn, and hopefully, the Ravens get the full term of the contract and look at this as one of the greatest deals in team history. I would think by the end, even at $20 million a year, if he's playing the way he was this year and last, I don't think there's any question of whether that has value or not. I'm going to go back to the other thing you said, which is that the Ravens defense, since Roquan arrived, has basically been the best defense in football. And by the way, I completely agree with you on that. And I did, before this season, there was some discussion, and I'm a person who's guilty of this, who said a lot of this is also Tyus Bowser, who returned at the exact same time as Roquan did. And so not only did you have the value of Roquan game, but you also had Tyus Bowser creating all this pass rush flexibility for the team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? No Tyus Bowser this year, and the Ravens are just as good as they were last year.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I'm excited. Marlon Humphrey's coming back soon. Tyus is coming back soon. Hopefully, Oweh's coming back soon. I mean, Marcus Williams also. Like, they're getting a lot of some of their top players back, and this is going to be a heck of a unit in November and December, and hopefully they can take this to an even higher level. But they are playing some excellent team defense right now.
Yeah, it is. You've said that about like 3 or 4 times on these 2 episodes that we've recorded tonight, and it bears mentioning. They are team in so many ways. Their team in terms of their zone defense, all eyes are on the football, and they're rallying to the football. Their team in terms of being good assignment players who understand, if you're a defensive lineman, how you take up space. Listen to Brent Urban talk in the interview he did with me about how he denies space as a run defender, and that he sometimes has to think about making a play for himself, but he's also, a lot of times, he's trying to set up somebody else behind him. It's true of a Pierce as well. That's another element of team defense. The fact that they play cover 2, and that is decreasing what might not be a significant weakness anymore. We don't really know at this point because they've played so well at outside cornerback, has been a great element of team defense. And the fourth I'd add is that the pass rush is very team dependent. It's dependent on multiple components of getting home to finish sacks. And they're third in the National freaking Football League in sacks right now with 15. So there's no element of this, I don't think, that has not. And, we always hear the comment that pass rush and coverage are so inexorably linked that you can't possibly find all of the separations to isolate the impact of either one. And analysts will say that anyway. I've heard it a number of times, but I think this team is proving that as much as any. It's a great fundamental scheme, but it's also got great individual play to basically stop the run with 6 defenders in the box, to allow these outside corners to have basically a little bit of an easier job than they would otherwise by playing a lot of cover 2, and by having some incredible game wreckers in terms of players like Clowney and Hamilton, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, who can make a lot of individual effort plays as well when needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're just they're everywhere. And they are playing just excellent ball right now. Yep.
All right. Is it your turn in front of the play, or is it mine? I don't remember anymore.
You did Roquan, so
okay.
I'll do Patrick Queen, who is playing easily the best ball of his career, and he is taking a cue from Roquan, and he is flying everywhere as well. Like that duo, I don't know if there's a better duo of inside linebackers in the league, but he is he's flying around, and the physicality that he's showing, it's just something that we've rarely seen in his first few years that we're seeing now. Like when he blitzed and got that sack, I mean, he bowled over that, I think it was that fullback, and knocked over an offensive lineman as well to get that sack. And I mean, like, he didn't have that physicality early on in his career, and he's taken it on, and he's playing at a very high level right now. You're on mute.
Yeah, I agree entirely. In the case of Queen and what he's been able to accomplish this season, he hasn't been perfect as a tackler this year, but he's made up for it with a lot of really fine plays coming from level 2 and making his presence known as he did in this game on a sack. He did some things in coverage that were positive. I think we mentioned in the first episode, but he was coming in hard on Njoku, who made a career decision to hold up on the ball, tipped it, was almost intercepted by Stone. First of all, probably should have been a reception. But Njoku may have been correct in his thought that ball was going to be dislodged from him in any case. He was going to be separated from that football. But what it ended up doing when he touched the ball is it gave Stone a chance for the interception. He didn't make it that time, but each one of those is a nice solid lottery ticket on interception in terms of having a chance for a turnover. And you just need to accumulate those, accumulate good chances. It's like having good at bats in baseball. You're eventually going to get some extra base hits.
Right. Yep.
The other thing I think is worth mentioning about Queen, this happened late in the game, but he had a very odd play where he chose basically not to take the head off of a Browns receiver near the right sideline. Did you catch that play?
No. So maybe I just don't remember it sticking out that much. Yeah.
I mean, it was. I'm going to try and find out a timestamp for you, but I'd really like to get your view on this because it was the kind of play where I really would have expected him to. Where was it? Darn it. Yeah, it's Q4 14-21. That's the play. That's the timestamp. Okay. So what I have here is 2nd and 24, 96 Bulls 75, 24 Bulls 79 to flush 17 from near safety to RR 12. Okay, so he was in the end zone. DTR almost went down. 6 chooses not to tackle. Empty, no attempt at 8-yard line, and 40 drags down. So Harrison kind of had him at that point, but he could have, you have a backup quarterback already in the game. And I know the game's out of reach, but DTR was not going down, and that was a good opportunity to separate the upper and lower halves of his body on that play, and it really seemed like something that probably should have been taken in terms of a hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Take a look. And other folks out there, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this in terms of any comments when the episode is posted. You just comment directly to that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Q4 14-21. Is that a hit you'd rather see Patrick Queen take?
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Yeah.
All right. You talked about Patrick Queen. Let me pick a player. A guy who I thought had a really good game, has been playing really well this season, kind of under the radar because there hasn't been a lot of snaps, is Malik Harrison. Excuse me. And basically he's playing exclusively outside linebacker. Most of the times he'd been playing in the base package in previous weeks. This week they played all nickel, so he played nickel some, and they gave a little bit of snap relief to their outside linebackers, particularly as the game went on. He didn't play that many total snaps in this game, and his total for the season is relatively small, like he's played under 40 snaps, I think, but really played some terrific run defense. He's been good in terms of taking people down quickly after the catch as a defender, in terms of a coverage defender, and just been an exceptional player who I think has gone under the radar. And that'll happen when you only play 40 snaps in 4 games. But I think worth noting, I thought he had a really good game this week.
He's been good at setting the edge and not letting the running back get outside. I have noticed that a couple of times. He's moving well and defending that edge really well. So yeah.
All right. Who would you like to talk about otherwise? I still got a couple of guys from the secondary I want to hit on.
Brandon Stevens. Congratulations to him on his first career interception. And he has made himself into at least an above average starting cornerback this year. He's been a guy last year. He played well in a backup role, and there's been some ups and downs with him. Like he got benched in, I think, the New England game last year, and then came back later in the season and started playing a little bit better in a reserve role, and he's taken over the starting cornerback role and has been easily their best cornerback and has played really, really good ball, and once Marlon gets back, him and Marlon could be a really nice duo, and he's playing physical. He's physical against the run, making good tackles, and is been a good coverage guy. Like he's not a shut. I wouldn't say I would call him a shutdown corner, but he's been very solid and not giving up a lot of plays.
Now, we know that in general, the Ravens have allowed very few yards per pass play. So that goes into this, of course. But both Darby and Stevens have opposing quarterback ratings under 79 this year. That's just outstanding. The NFL average is probably closer to 100 than 95, I would guess. I'd have to look at that to be sure, but it'd be in that range between 95 and 100. And each of them has only missed one tackle, which is a huge stat for cornerbacks who, if they miss a tackle, it tends to be a lot worse than if a defensive lineman misses a tackle and the guy gets 4 extra run yards because of it. Or even on a missed sack, sometimes it might not be as serious because it retracts the quarterback into a as bad or worse situation. But the big thing for Stevens, from my point of view, would be yards per target. I want to get this right here. So he's given up. Oh, come on now. Stevens has given up. He's had 33 targets and given up 226 yards. So that's under 7 yards a target this year, which should be a big improvement on his career. 6.8 yards per target. That's very solid for an outside cornerback, by the way. Darby has given up 123 yards. And where's his target? Number 25. He's given up under 5 yards per target.
Wow.
Yeah. Most important stats there for a cornerback is, along with how many penalties are they giving up, is what's the passer rating against, the yards per target, and I guess are they getting beat for TDs is the other thing. Stevens has not been beat for a TD. Darby got beat for 1. That was by T. Higgins in the corner of the end zone on a play that only T. Higgins can make.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm very happy with the Ravens corners on all levels so far. Should we be at all concerned that the average quarterback the Ravens will face is going to go up substantially for the rest of the season?
There could be some concern, but you also have to think about that. Marcus Williams is coming back. He's been missing the last 3 games. Marlon Humphrey's been out the entire season. And I mean, CJ Stroud has lit up these last 3 opponents, including the Steelers this week, and could not move the ball against the Ravens at all in week 1. And so, and Joe Burrow, he seems to be hampered a little bit, but he is. I mean, that's still Joe Burrow out there, and that's still Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, who are excellent number 1 wide receivers, and they've been able to shut down that offense. So, yeah, the level of competition is going to go up, but also it's going to be more bad weather as the season goes on, and like I don't. Maybe they're not going to be as spectacular as they've been these first 4 weeks, but I'm not going to expect that large of a drop either in their play.
Right. Well, I'm very excited about it. It's certainly been one of the big surprises is how well the secondary as a whole has played. We knew the safety group was good, but we also knew Marcus Williams got hurt in that very first game. So it's been one thing after another. So the guy I want to talk about is Geno Stone, and he has been, again, a guy who filled in for Williams at a level unexpectedly high again this year. He's that perfect back end half field guy, loose bracket. He's very comfortable with, which means he's really playing for the overthrow and the tip well. He's a good tackler. And I think he's just been excellent for a split field safety to have eyes on the quarterback and try to figure out what's going on. We saw that big time against Joe Burrow with the one time Burrow really tested the defense down the middle of the field. And they actually had a very complex play design there to take Stone out of the play by having the receiver on the left side, Jamar Chase, I believe, run him to coverage on that side.
Right.
And Stone misread Chase's initial movement. That's easy to see why he did. If you look at the video, he's looking right at Burrow the whole time. He didn't even try and look at Chase. So whatever they were trying to do with him in terms of the poker game of offensive coordinating that play, it didn't work, and he moved right in and closed that window in a very classic way. As you're closing the window from the front side of that play, you close that window at several times the speed that a trailing defender can catch up to a receiver. So that quarterback is focused on how much, where do I have to put that ball to be just past the trail coverage? But the guy you really need to look at in zone coverage is the guy who's closing the window from the other side. You got to see in front of the receiver. And Burrow didn't do a good job of that game, but Burrow's arm strength was such that it would have made things difficult. And when I look at that, now I'm trying to figure out how many elite arm strength guys are there in the AFC. Certainly, they're playing Justin Herbert later this year. Yeah. But how much do they really need to be worried about? They're going to play the Lions. That's Jared Goff. I don't think of him as being an elite arm strength guy.
Yeah, he's not exactly striking fear.
No.
Yeah.
And that's a good team. No doubt about it. But
yeah, they're a good team, but yeah, Jared Goff is not the one that is gonna scare you that much. Yeah.
Word came out today that Mitch Trubisky is likely to take Kenny Pickett's spot this week because Trubisky has some sort of an ongoing problem where he's going to miss time.
Yeah, Pickett hurt his knee yesterday.
How do you feel like that in terms of the difference of the quality of opponent?
The way Pickett has been playing, I'm almost disappointed that he's missing the game. He hasn't been good at all. The good news is Mitch Trubisky is not a good quarterback either. So I guess I would probably rather have Pickett, but it's fine. I'll take on Trubisky as well.
I would rather have Pickett as well. And I went through the same kind of 5 steps of fear and loathing, or whatever the 5 steps are of grief. But the thing I also came to the conclusion of was that, yes, you're playing Trubisky and he's probably a slight step up from Pickett, but you're also then the backup quarterback has to be somebody who's got to be off the charts bad, right? I don't even know who that would be. Their number 3 quarterback.
Yeah.
I'll take just a moment to look that up because I think that's but their number 3 quarterback is Mason Rudolph. Okay, we've seen him play before. He's bad, but you could probably do worse with your number 3 quarterback.
Right.
Mason Rudolph will still always be the guy who had I think it was his face mask unscrewed as he walked off the field loopy the one time. Do you recall this?
No, I only remember him because Myles Garrett took his helmet off and then tried to gently place it back on. But but yeah, no, I don't remember that. I remember him. He had a really bad game against the Ravens. I guess probably back in their 20 Lamar's MVP season. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'll have to see if I can get a picture of it that gives me anything more, but I can't right away. So anyway, yeah, there it is. There's the picture. It is in a Baltimore game. He left the field with no face guard. They had to screw it off him during the process of looking at him on the field. And the score at that time was 17-13 in the third quarter, midway through the third quarter.
Oh, wow. But
it's not a good look if you look at this. So, all right. If we're done with players, do you have anybody else you want to hit on before we go?
No, I think we touched everybody.
All right. Well, let's give our defensive MVPs of this game. As usual, we'll do it 3, 2, 1. You're the guest. Please tell me who your number 3 guy is.
Okay. Number 3, I had Mr. Almost. I had Davian Clowney. He was just really disruptive in the pass rush and also good at the run defense. So I thought he was thought he deserved special mention, against his old team.
I'm sorry for that, folks. I thought I had my mute on when I did that, dealing with a cold here, trying to get through it. Great choice, by the way. So my number 3 guy is Justin Madubuike. I thought, he had his best game of the year by a fairly wide margin, did well in some limited snaps, 35 in this game, and applied very significant pressure beating a decent offensive line to generate that.
Yeah. So my number two, I couldn't choose just one. So I cheated a little bit. I had the
Cheater,
entire
cheater.
defensive line. Yeah, cheater.
All right. Well, you got your guy in there. I'll give you my number two guy, even though he only played 23 snaps, is Kyle Van Noy. I think he came in and made an immediate impact, run and pass. I thought drew the holding penalty, 3 pressures plus a batted ball as I scored it. So he did a lot of things well in this game immediately as a presence, and I think he looks like he's the player the Ravens need to supplement Tyus Bowser when he comes back and play a significant amount of those Sam snaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, had a very nice debut. Yeah. And my number one was Roquan. Roquan, he was just absolutely all over the field, and the leadership that he's displaying, the way this defense is playing, since he's taken over, it's just been phenomenal. And I mean, and if he keeps playing like this and the defense keeps playing like this, he should probably get some Defensive Player of the Year votes as well.
Now that's an interesting thing, because I think the Ravens could have some vote splitting that goes on with that. That's something that, the Steelers maybe had when Harrison and Palomalo were both great at the same time. It's something, that the Ravens haven't really faced in the same way, but maybe with Lewis and Reed at certain times, like 2008, it might have been a minor consideration, maybe in 2006, even more so, with multiple players who were contributing on that defense. But it is a possibility. I think also Kyle Hamilton is still in the running. And we didn't talk about him in a specific way here, other than a lot of talk about, is he really going to be more impactful up front? He's an honorable mention guy for me. That last minute interception, was it the last play of the game? It was the last play of the game.
Yeah, it's last play. Yep.
And I guess you saw in the on Twitter that he gave the ball to his mom at the airport, it looks like. Or
that's great.
Some other place where they have a thing. I wonder if Brandon Stevens is feeling some shame for not doing that, or maybe he wants it for himself and whatnot. Kyle Hamilton's going to have a lot more accolades throughout his career. But we had Melissa Kim on the show last week, and she talked about how she and Kyle both have Korean moms, and they're both described. And I would be a little uncomfortable bringing this up, but she used it and seems to be comfortable with the moniker that they're both Tiger moms. Who push their kids very hard, want their kids to get into the Ivy League school. And both she and Kyle have come to the conclusion that going to second-tier colleges that were not Ivy League, or anything outside the Ivy League is a second-tier college, in theory.
Sure.
And they each had a sibling who went to Penn together. So they had this in common. It was kind of nice to hear. But I know that I don't like generalized racialness in general, but to have it come in that case from Melissa, I thought was kind of entertaining, and that she and Kyle really bonded over something they shared.
Right. Yeah. Another play that I really loved from Kyle, and it was at the end of the game, that long 40-yard run that they had at the end of the game. Kyle was hustling and caught up to him and made that tackle. And I mean, for a play that was literally meaningless, for him to, just be out there hustling and stopping them and keeping them from getting in the end zone, I think that sets a great tone for the defense as a whole, and his individual effort as well.
Did he run that down from the other side of the field? Was he on the other side, lined up on the other side, the other half of coverage? Yeah. Yeah, that's very impressive when that happens. There is a play in Ravens history which is the ultimate play of that type that I just love, because it was early in a game. It was meaningful in terms of the play. But Lardarius Webb ran somebody down in the 2014 win at New Orleans. And they won the game by 2 touchdowns probably in the end, or maybe it was a little closer than that. But Lardarius Webb ran somebody down for a 66-yard gain at the 1-yard line. I think that's the approximate level. I might have it slightly wrong. Wow. But it was from slot corner on the opposite side. And he ran the guy down on the play, knocked him out of bounds, and then the Ravens stopped him on 4 downs from that spot. And that totally set the tone for the game in terms of being a huge play.
Yeah. No, it was Kyle is, and he's an eraser when it comes to coverage against tight ends and slot corners as slot receivers as well. So he's playing very good ball as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Great stuff here. I think we're going to have to cut off any additional film study mailbag, but really appreciate the questions. Some great stuff we included in the first episode. Hope you go back and listen to that. Brandon, I want to thank you. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Sure. I'm on Twitter at Brandon Croxton5, and just looking forward to the game on Sunday. It's Steelers week, so get ready and get pumped.
I don't think it's going to be a lot of difficulty for me. This is one of the biggest weekends for Baltimore sports coming up. We've had a long time with 2 Orioles playoff games at home, a Steelers game, and honestly, we have some difficulty deciding where we need to be. I'm really hoping Major League Baseball bails us out with a night game for the Orioles.
Right.
But my guess is they're probably going to be the Dodgers and Braves of the night games. So they will stick it to us in the way it's been done in Thursdays of old, where the Ravens didn't get the opener.
I'll settle if they have it as a 4:00 game on Sunday.
Right.
I would take that. Yeah.
If you're doing it on TV, you got no problem with that. If you're doing it, you want to go to both games, or watch the first one on TV and go to the other. That's a much harder double.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, very, very excited. This is a great time to be a Baltimore sports fan. The Orioles are just, they play great, and they're playing great team ball. Like there's no true superstar out there. Like maybe we look back 10 years from now, this was the beginning of a Hall of Fame careers for Adley and Gunnar. But I mean, the rest of this team are, average to good players, but they're playing just great team ball, and it's really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think other folks may have missed it, but this weekend, the Norfolk Tides on Saturday went up to Las Vegas to play the single game AAA championships. They play a best of 3 to win the International League, and they did that by winning the last 2 games. And then they went out to Las Vegas to play one game against, it was the Dodgers Oklahoma City team for the AAA championship. And one thing that you can take a lot of solace in, and they won the game 7-6. Kowser hit a grand slam to win the game, or to put them ahead anyway. You look at that team, and they're 1 through 6 players in the batting order. Every single one of them should be a very good major league player. And it is just so exciting. The era of Baltimore baseball we're entering here is very special. It's a lot like being around the 2002 Ravens and seeing how good they looked in terms of rookie talent and talent that was just there getting their first meaningful playing time, like Kelly Gregg, who'd been in the league for a couple of years, and how good they projected to be thereafter.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very good. Just get that lease signed, officially signed, and
yeah. Okay, I have to ask you about that. How upset should we be as fans that they announced that we have a signed lease and we don't have crap?
I was very upset.
Yeah.
it got me. Yes, it got me very nervous as well.
Okay, so which of those 2 pinheads should we be more upset with? Is this more of an Angelos issue or a Wes Moore issue? And I don't mean in terms of the negotiation. I mean in terms of announcing it as a done deal at that game.
Well, I don't think Wes Moore has control of the big board, so I'm putting all the blame on Angelos on that.
See, I think Angelos, as a lawyer, I think he's a lawyer too, like his dad. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe he's just a businessman. I think he should have known better in terms of announcing it because it's not that. But he's willing to stand up for this lie if Moore is, because Moore's got everything to lose and Angelos has a non-binding agreement. So if you want to put Moore in an even worse negotiating position, just say the deal's done and then have Moore try and explain it to his constituency, because Angelos doesn't have anything riding on that.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm pissed off with Wes Moore, and I thought he the way he was cheering in the stands about the whole thing indicated a deal was actually done. And I feel bad about this because as we entered the stadium for that night, and the Ravens, the Orioles also won their 100th game that day. So it was a big deal.
Night,
yeah. And there was a guy handing out flyers outside that said, "Save the Orioles." And I didn't take one. I really should have. And we get inside, we hear that the deal is done. I'm like, well, that guy was wasting his time out there handing out those flyers. Well, no, I think he probably knew what was going on.
Yeah, he must have. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
So
But
anyway, uh, real pleasure doing this with you. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, please hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. You know the way that works by now, but I'll get back to you very quickly if you send me a message and talk through your idea about what make a good show. Brandon, thanks again for coming on. Just a wonderful discussion.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.